the first thing that I wanted to say today was that I didn't go to this webinar yesterday, but a friend of mine, a fundraising colleague of mine, highlighted it to me, which was a new report called Caring Too Much, that's been shared. And it's about, I've put a link to it right at the top of the chat. And it's about burnout in fundraisers. And that it's becoming increasingly an issue and increasingly a problem. And it was about raising awareness of that fact of burnout in fundraisers and suggestions for solutions, the way forward. So I'd really encourage you. I haven't had a look at the report yet or the webinar. I've shared a link to the webinar, as I said, in the chat, but I'd really encourage you to have a look through. I think I've heard the webinar was really good. Because I think that it's really, really important. Fundraisers, I don't know any fundraisers who aren't always really, really busy. And, it is pressurized, isn't it? There's targets to reach. And I think our colleagues in trust fundraising, and some of you might do both, you do trust fundraising and major donor, and be responsible for all the other types of fundraising in your organisation as well. So, it's particularly in trust at the moment, it's really hard, it's really competitive, success rates have gone down, and people are really struggling with their resilience, and the pressure of that. I keep hearing, and we know that people are leaving the profession as well. So I think this sort of work is really, really important. And so the report is called Caring Too Much, and it's about burnout in fundraisers. And there was also a report recently shared by the small charity group or collective, I can't remember exactly what it's called, Vic Hancock Fell. And that report was particularly around burnout in small charity leaders. So if that's you, if you're a small charity leader, that's also worth having a look at. And linked to what I just said about burnout, I just want to start also with asking you, maybe you could put this into chat as well, is I was walking this morning, walking my dog, and I do it every morning, and it's beautiful here today, it's really sunny, and we walk across this field, and it's this hill, but you don't know until the ridge what you see, and then it's a beautiful view. That I live in a village, and we're lucky that we live surrounded by beautiful countryside, and it's just this beautiful panoramic view, and that hasn't changed for years and years and years. There's a couple of really old houses, that's about it, and there's some horses, and the colours were beautiful, the blue sky, I could hear the skylarks singing. And that particular field we call Happy Field. I don't know what it's actually called, but we call it Happy Field in our house because it makes our dog do these really enormous circles, big flappy ears and a big smile on its face. And I was thinking how important it is to just, it's so beneficial to me to set up my day by going for a dog walk and just stopping at the brow of that hill and shutting my eyes and hearing the skylarks and breathing in the air and opening them and seeing these beautiful colours and this beautiful view. So I was wondering where your happy place is. And have you been there today? It could be anywhere, couldn't it? It doesn't even have to be a place, but where's your happy place? Maybe pop that in chat as well. Right, I can hear lots of background noise from somebody. So just a reminder, please, to keep your microphones off, because otherwise it picks up all the background noise, particularly if you're in an office or an open plan space. Right, so a bit of background about me while you're all thinking of your questions. If no questions come up, that's fine. I've got some things that I can talk about. So I'm an associate fundraising consultant with Tree Fundraising. I specialise in high value giving, so major donors and capital appeals. I'm also a fundraising consultant and coach separate to my work with Tree. And I'm a trustee of Kent, Surrey and Sussex Air Ambulance, which has been brilliant. I've been doing that for about 3 years, and in my day job I'm quite often doing workshops for trustees about how to support philanthropy fundraising in their organisations, and it's been really, really helpful to see it from the other side. I coach within the charity sector and beyond, but generally not-for-profit sector, and things that are coming up with people that I'm coaching at the moment are around redundancies and career transitions, imposter syndrome, about confidence and resilience. So all the things I'm sure that some of you will have been experiencing within your work. And I've been in fundraising over 25 years. So I started off in corporate fundraising for MenCap. And before I became a fundraising consultant, I was director of fundraising and communications for a regional homelessness charity. So I've got a question here from Ottilie. How do you approach a conversation to an existing donor to increase their donation if you think they have the capacity? Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? So, Ottilie, the first thing I would ask you is this somebody who has given regularly over time? Is it someone that you have a relationship with? How long have they been supporting your charity? Because those are all indicators of whether they're, how loyal they are, whether they're going to give again, how close they feel towards the charity. So how would I approach that? So I'm assuming, let's assume you've got a relationship. Actually, Ottilie, do you want to just unmute and tell us a bit of background about your donor? How close are they to the charity? How long have they been supporting? Have they only given a one-off gift? Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't know. I might have some background noise for a second, but yeah, I suppose it just popped into my head recently that he is a strong advocate for the theatre charity I work in. He comes to every performance. He comes to more kind of community development focused performances as well. But I was sort of looking at his track record, and it is quite a consistent level of giving. It's our sort of silver membership, which is about £500 worth. But I know that he sort of invests in other projects as well. So I have a feeling that he has the capacity to give more. And I suppose what I've heard is whether, what kind of circumstances would promote him to increase his gift. And I suppose that would be the first thing I'd need to find out. But in terms of even just approaching that conversation, it's very much out of my depth.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, what I would say is, so he's consistently giving, but he's giving at a level £500, but you have a feeling that he has the capacity to give more. So so you can do things like wealth screening, can't you? So you could do some research into him and to try and ascertain his capacity to give and his wealth capacity. And you can either do that as part of wealth screening, a bigger chunk of your database, or you can ask, normally it's external companies, unless you've got a prospect researcher, to undertake a research profile on him, and that will give you some more indication, a very clear indication of kind of what bracket he sits in. If you don't have the budget to do that, or that's not feasible, then you could do some desk research yourself. So you said you know that he has donated to other projects, so have a look at what other projects he's donated to. Have a look at those charities' annual accounts, or if they have any recognition boards, try and ascertain what level that he's given to those other charities. You can also do some sort of desk research around, what postcode he lives in. Does he live in an affluent area? Is he titled? What's his job title if he's working? And I guess also it's the best way, though, is in having those conversations with him. So obviously you're not going to go straight in and ask him how much money he's got and whether he could give a bigger gift. But if he's somebody that's giving consistently, he comes to your events, I would go and have a coffee with him, ask if you can have a one-to-one catch up, talk to him about the impact of the gift that he's made so far, what a difference it's made. Give him that kind of impact update and gauge from that his level of interest. Ask him what areas of your work he's particularly interested in. What motivates him when he's choosing to support your charity. What's he most interested in the work that you do? So you're gathering lots of information and having a conversation with him and just finding out more. And it's okay to say, I'm having some discovery conversations with our closest supporters, and I'm just really interested in finding a bit more about, what motivated you to support our charity in the first place. what do you love about our work? What's your experience been so far with us as a supporter of us? And you can gauge from that conversation quite quickly whether he's going to be somebody who is just sort of like, oh, I'm quite happy giving my £500. That's all I want to do. I don't really want to be involved in any other way. Or if he starts saying, well, actually, that's really interesting, or I'm really motivated by this, or I really want to hear more about that. And then you can start building those conversations and that communication with him around those areas that he's most interested in. And then, you're not going to jump straight in and ask him for a massively increased gift, I'm guessing. So it's about keep having that contact with him, and then having another conversation with him when the time is right. If he's given all the right indications about that, that you'd really love to give him the opportunity to support these other areas of work that he's interested in, and that you're hoping to secure X amount of funding towards this project. Where does he see, is it something that he's interested in funding? Where does he see himself sitting within those different levels of funding that's needed for that particular project? Would he consider a gift towards that area? Would he consider a gift in a range of X to X if you're not sure exactly how much to ask for? So I guess summing up, there's two ways, isn't there? There's the kind of research and using data that's out there, and maybe wealth screening, so that you have a clear idea of his capacity to give. But by far, you're going to get the most out of having those kind of discovery and exploratory conversations with him that aren't necessarily focused on how much money he's got available to give, but are focused on what his motivations are. What does he love about the charity? What's working well? How does he want you to communicate with him, just so that you can get to know him on a more personal basis? Does that help at all, Ottilie? Has anybody else got any other ideas that Ottilie could do?
That's great, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, let's have a look at another question. We're looking at ways that we connect with philanthropy advisors. Does anyone have any tips? Yeah, donor advised funds. How can you get in front of those philanthropy advisors? So I said this last time, but I do think it's really helpful. We know if you're a local or regional charity, for example, your community foundation will have a philanthropy advisor that's in front of all the people that hold funds with them. So if you are a local charity, do make that connection with those philanthropy advisors at your local community foundation. I was talking to a community foundation recently for a client, and they were saying that they have monthly get-togethers of their fund holders, and it's the philanthropy advisor that organises them. And and she was saying, well, we can get my client, not me, but my client along to one of them to talk about it and to network and to meet those fund holders. So that's somewhere you could start. Also, wealth managers within the big banks, private banking, and the wealth managers within those banks, they often have money can't buy things that they do with their clients. So is there something you could offer in that sense? If you're a theatre, for example, can you offer behind the scenes look at the stage and the dressing rooms, or meet if you've got a performance on? Could you invite private banking clients through their wealth manager to meet some of the cast? It's easier if you're a theatre, isn't it? I do appreciate that. But what have you got that you could perhaps offer? And I said this last month, but I did some work with one of the national park foundations, and one of their supporters was a wealth manager for one of the banks, the big banks. And he organised for them to go out with a ranger, and they planted some trees, completely different to what they normally did. But they absolutely loved it, and it gave the philanthropy manager a chance to spend half a day with these people and really, build some relationships, have some really good conversations. And they were also able to say to those people, is it okay if we keep in contact with you directly? Because it's quite hard, isn't it, to get to the actual fund holders, the actual donors, when it's a donor advised fund or they're looked after by a wealth manager. You won't have their details. So if you can do something like that, it gives you a chance to get to know them. Any ideas that you've got? What's worked for you? How have you got in front of and connected with philanthropy advisors and the people whose funds they're holding. Okay, let's have another question here. We've got one from Tracy. My glasses are a bit bad. Tracy Blackmore. Hi, Tracy. What would be your first step in engaging trustees with philanthropy? I like that you've asked the first step, because there's loads of things that you can do to engage your trustees. What I would say is, what's become really apparent to me as a trustee is that your time is quite limited as a trustee, especially if you're a working trustee, which a lot of boards are nowadays, aren't they? You know, I think they used to be full of people who are retired or didn't need to work, but actually, thankfully, there's a bit more diversity on boards now, and you have got younger people on boards, you've got people that are working. So at the Air Ambulance that I'm a trustee of, but predominantly we're a working board, which means that your time is fairly limited because you're really busy. And of course, as trustees, you only come together every 3 months, and you might come together in your subcommittees, but you generally come together every 3 months. They're 3-hour meetings, and they're always really packed. Like, it's a really, really packed agenda. So it's really hard to just sort of slot in some focus on philanthropy. We do have a strategy day each year, and that has been, because we're together for the whole day, that is where we found some more space to talk about philanthropy and why it's so important. I think a good first step also is getting to know your trustees individually. So not all of them are going to be able to be involved in philanthropy fundraising. Not all of them are going to be coming with these brilliant connections into high net worth individuals or move in those circles and those communities. But if you know that they do, rather than trying to just engage them through a board meeting and engage them as jointly as a group, maybe think about being a bit more strategic and building relationships with them individually. Go out, you know, like you would with a donor. Go out, have a coffee with them, get to know them. You know, again, like what motivated them to come on board. How do they want to help? You know, where do they see themselves adding value and bringing something to your charity? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's in contact people that rich people that they can introduce you to, does it? It could be advice, it could be pro bono, guidance, advice. There's all sorts of ways. So I know a lot about philanthropy, and that's one of the reasons I'm on the board, but I don't move in kind of circles of wealthy people. So I have sort of few connections I can introduce to the charity in terms of becoming major donors. But what I do have is a really wide network of people within the charity sector. And one of the things that I do is connect staff to staff in other organisations, so that they've got a sounding board or someone to talk things through with, and that can be really helpful. I know we were doing something about social impact at the Air Ambulance, and I connected them with a director of social impact at a charity that I used to work for. You know, so actually think really widely about how you want each trustee to how you want to work with them and what you think they can bring. Don't just assume that they've all got these amazing contacts. If you are lucky enough to have trustees with amazing major donor contacts, don't just ask them, like, who do you know, who can you go and ask for a donation, because it just puts the frighteners on people. But what you could do is, after spending some time getting to know them, is something called network mapping. So you could sit down with them and, I used to do it if it's face to face, just with a massive flip chart and some marker pens. If you're going to do it online, you can use Miro or other whiteboards where you can create a mind map. And I try and do it in quite an informal way. And we just explore the different communities and networks that people are part of. And that can be work, it can be previous work, it could be other boards. Are they non-exec directors of other boards? Do they work for other charities? Are they governors? You often find that people who are trustees sit on more than one board. If you're really lucky, they might sit on the board of a grant-making trust. What are their hobbies? What are their interests? You know, they might belong to a golf club or a sports club. They might belong, what community organisations are they part of? Are they part of the Rotary? What alumni groups are they part of that they might be able to make introductions to people through faith groups. And it's just about what I say to them, it's not about asking you to go out and ask people for money. It's about exploring the communities that you're part of and thinking about the people in those communities who love what we do as much as you do. You know, who do you think is going to share that passion? Who do you think will be really interested in what we do? Who do you think should know about what we're doing here? Because it's going to feel important to them. So that's a really good way of getting trustees involved. You asked me what was the first small step, and I've gone right off on all the different things you can do, haven't I? Another way you could do it is if you've got some key people that you would like to find an introduction to, and this works particularly well with trusts as well, if you've got key trusts that you would really like to find a personal connection with, particularly given that so many are moving towards this invite only rather than accepting unsolicited applications, you could you could give the trustees a list of those people. You could say, look, here's 6 people we really want to find a personal connection with. Do you know any of these people? You can do that as a group, but again, I find it's better done individually. And lastly, there's probably loads of other things, but lastly, something I think that's really important is feeding back. So celebrate successes, and that can be done at those board meetings. It doesn't take long, does it? But you know, celebrate successes, particularly if a trustee has made an introduction to somebody and you've met them or the relationship has progressed. It doesn't have to have progressed all the way to a donation yet, a gift, but you know, get that trustee to talk about how they made that introduction. It can be really motivating to hear from your peers. So it's all very well us as fundraisers banging on about, you know, we should be doing this, or it'd be great if you could introduce us to this person, blah, blah, blah. If a trustee has done that already and they've seen some progress and they've got something out of that, get them to tell the other trustees about it. Yeah, and just keep engaging your trustees. You know, if you do a thankathon, ask them to come and help out with a thankathon. Give them really easy options and nice, easy ways for them to get involved with what you do. Ooh. This question is from Marianne, and you're an Yorkshire Air Ambulance. So nice to meet you too, Marianne. You're just establishing a formal major donor programme. Love to know if I have a top tip for establishing a new programme from scratch for an air ambulance charity. Top tip. Right, I'll try not to like go off on a massive amount of tips and keep it to top tips. Start with who you know. So it's much easier, isn't it, to engage the people that are already supporting you than it is to go and find new people all the time. You need both. You need to constantly kind of bring in new people into your pipeline, into your portfolio. But the best place to start, I think, is always with who do you already have? Who's already supporting you, either at that level that you are classing as major gift, major donor level, or who do you think has the capacity, going back to what we were saying earlier with Ottilie's question, who do you think has the capacity to support in a bigger way, but maybe isn't identifying as that at the moment? Maybe they're giving £5 a month, but you know that they're the potential major donor. Start with those people. You know, who are the people that are close to the charity? So I'd have a look on a practical tip. What I'd say is, you know, do some analysis of your database if you've got one, even if it's a spreadsheet, whatever you use to record donations. Do some analysis. Who's giving regularly at the levels that might indicate that they could be a major donor or could move into that major donor bracket. And don't just look at the size of the gift, look at their cumulative giving as well. So you're looking at the recency of gifts and cumulative giving, as well as the amount that they've given. And then think about how close they are to your charity. You know, where are they in their relationship with you? Are they a repeat donor? Are they someone who gave a one-off gift? And then think about how interested they are in your charity. So, you know, are they involved and engaged, and they're responding to communications, and they're giving regularly to appeals, and they're coming to events that you invite them to? Or are they actually, they're giving, but you don't know very much about them? So I would do all of that and kind of start with the people that are giving regularly at high level, and have, you know, are regularly coming to things or expressing some level of interest, and kind of work your way through that list, because and have conversations with those people. Again, I say this, I think, every time, but you know, those discovery calls, start engaging them, asking them, you know, get to know them, all those things I said earlier. You know, what made them support your charity, what do they enjoy about what you do, what do they think is most special about what you do. That's my top tip, is that's where I would start. And you don't need loads of major donors when you start out. You really don't. I think it's a bit of a myth, is that, oh, we can't do major donor fundraising because we haven't got any major donors. I mean, one, you might not know until you screen your database. You might have loads of major donor potentials sitting there in your database giving you £2 a month, and you don't know that they're there. But you don't need loads of major donors to start off with. You know, it's about the quality of the relationship you have with them, rather than the quantity and the number of major donors that you've got connected to your charity. And my next top tip would be back to, it all connects up, doesn't it? Back to talking to your trustees about if they know any of those people and would be happy to help build the relationship with them. Oh, look, there's a tip here from John, which was also the corporate fundraiser for the charity, as well as the major donor fundraiser. Often, I bet loads of you wear lots of different hats and are responsible for lots of different income streams. So you do a lot of networking, you've met a few wealth advisors, you tend to go along the lines of, do you get many people wishing to support a charity? I'd love to have a chat separately so we can explore this. And if you don't do networking yourself, maybe you could ask your corporate fundraisers to look out for these kind of connections. That's a good tip, John. Thank you for putting that. What's a thunkathon? Did I miss here? Steph, yeah, thunkathon. I like the idea of a thunkathon. I don't know what it would be. Thankathon, like a thank you, a thon. And a thankathon is it can be a day, it can be over a week. It all depends how big your charity is and how many supporters you've got. But it's where you just focus on saying thank you to your supporters of all size. And often that's done by phone, or you might choose donors to phone and say thank you. It's a really fantastic way to just have a brilliant conversation, particularly with your major donors, that you're not asking them for any money, you're just thanking them. You know, maybe they've given over a period of time, and they, you know, and actually that's cumulatively come to a huge amount of money, and it's a really good way to say thank you and that you really appreciate it, and maybe talking to them about the impact of their gift and what it's helped you do. Some charities send thank you cards. So Kent, Surrey and Sussex Air Ambulance, the trustees come in and staff and volunteers, and it's really nice. We all get together, and it's organised by the supporter experience team, and we write handwritten thank you cards to donors to say thank you. It's just, you know, saying thank you is so important, isn't it? And we all like to be thanked, and we all like to hear what a difference our support has made. And how nice as a donor to just have a conversation with someone saying thank you, rather than you thinking, oh, they're going to ask me for some more money. So that's what a thankathon is. I don't know what a thunkathon is. Any suggestions? Thunk them with a bat and steal all their money. That's one way of doing major donor fundraising, isn't it? I've got a question for you guys, actually. So Tree Fundraising, as I mentioned earlier, has all these free resources, but we also have these bite-sized training videos, webinars, and they're really reasonable. I think they're like £25–30, and you can, I suspect, I should know this, I suspect they're on the Tree Fundraising website, and you can register to sign up. But anyway, Tree Fundraising are having a look, reflecting on the suite of training that they offer. So from a philanthropy point of view, if you were going to buy a piece of training, they're about an hour long normally, I think, and they're on specific topics, specific subjects. What's most important to you? What's coming up for you? What would you want to see in a program of training? And it will just be really helpful, because then the training that we're devising and creating is directly what you need, rather than us assuming that we know what you need. What are some of those sort of biggest challenges? Training idea, getting the most from your CRM system. Yeah, there's so many different CRMs, aren't there? And there's so many different ways that people are using them, and different ways they're putting information on. A bit of a minefield sometimes, aren't they? But used well, they are brilliant resources, aren't they? So yeah, getting the most from your CRM system. And I think particularly in terms of philanthropy focus, you know, how are you setting up moves management on your CRM system? There's all sorts of things related to philanthropy, aren't they? But you know, how are you flagging qualified prospects? How are you tracking when people are moving from being a qualified prospect to having that first engagement? It's tracking income. There's all the opt-outs, aren't they? So if someone's opted out of wealth screening, how are you flagging that on your database? How are you managing that? So I'll put that in. Yeah, and how to make the most of wealth research. That is really, I mean, I can talk about wealth screening. I don't think I've got time probably today, but I can talk about wealth screening and things, because I think wealth screening can be really, really valuable and really helpful, but you have to know what you're going to do with that information. And often charities do it and they get this information back and it's like, oh, right, well, that's helpful, or that was interesting. But they don't quite know what to do with it. And that information just sort of gets a bit lost. And of course, with GDPR, you can't just hold information about people's wealth and not be doing anything with it. So there's all sorts of kind of process things that you have to think about before you do wealth screening, aren't there? You know, how are you going to transfer that data securely? How's it going to be put on the database? How are you going to limit access to it on your database? And then there's what you actually do with it. What do you do with it? How do you know what to do with these people? They might have given a one-off gift of £20, and suddenly they've come up on your wealth screening with a capacity of 50 million. It's like, how are you going to move them from here to here? Thanks, Tracy. And similarly, cold prospect researching. Yeah. Again, a lot of that comes down to having the resources and the capacity and knowing what to do with that information, doesn't it? You know. And again, you can't hold that information for just years and years. I mean, again, these are, sorry, Ottilie, go on.
Yeah, I think so. Whenever it sort of gets brought up in my organization, it's this kind of big thing of, you know, you need all hands on deck and there's more layers to it, but I'm not necessarily sure why, apart from things like planning permission, and obviously there's a lot of trusts and foundations that don't support capital related projects. So in that sense, there just seems to be more obstacles, and I suppose that's why it's feared.
Yeah. So like the basics of like what is a capital appeal? Why do you need them? How do they differ from ongoing fundraising? What's the different phases? How do you get going? All of that sort of thing. I mean, all of these are big topics, aren't they? We could talk about them for days, but I'll write that one down. Capital appeals. Okay, great, thank you. Keep popping them in there. I will, before I close off the meeting, I'll run back through and make sure I've jotted all of them down. I love capital appeals. I really love them. I've managed one that was for a children's hospice in the southwest, and also one to redevelop the theatre in Canterbury, in Kent. And I love working on capital appeals. They're kind of high stakes, they're frenetic, they are all encompassing, but they bring this huge focus to an organisation and they build this momentum, and they often kickstart philanthropy programmes. And they galvanise your supporters into supporting something together. And of course, they're tangible, aren't they? Because they often, not always, but often they're for buildings. So, or for buying something. So they feel that they can see the building rising, they can see the minibus that you've bought, or the whatever it is that you've bought, a helicopter if you're an air ambulance. So yeah, they're really tangible, and major donors love capital appeals. But there are all sorts of things you have to consider when you're doing a capital appeal. They're not something to be rushed into or jumped straight into without any planning or consideration. So there's another question here from Erica. Do people have a specific comms journey for major donors? We've not really done this before, and the comms with major donors hasn't been brilliant, to be completely honest. Should they get a regular newsletter or a card at certain points? Thank you, Erica, for that. Do chip in and pop your what works for you in your organisation when you're communicating with major donors. So there are two things I would suggest you do, Erica. One is that you develop a stewardship plan for each of your major donors. So what are the key points you're going to communicate with them? So that could be things like sending a birthday card and a Christmas card. I really like gift anniversary, either conversations or cards. But, you know, if someone's been giving for a really long time, or they've been giving for 10 years, really nice to say, you know, did you know this is your 10th gift anniversary? Over that 10 years, you've raised X amount of money, or you've donated X amount of money. This is what we've done with it. We're so grateful. Things like that. So those personal points. And you might want to give them, you might want to share your impact report with them. You might do research, and they might be particularly interested in an area of your work that some research has just been conducted on. It's got to be personal to a certain extent. So a newsletter, I'm in two minds about newsletters for major donors. You know, like one, they can bring people up to date and up to speed more widely with what you're doing. But I've seen it done before where major donors are kind of protected on a charity's database. Yeah, so they don't get the normal newsletter, which was really jolly and interesting and full of all sorts of things, and included things like, you know, do this trek or this run London Marathon for us. Oh, I think I'm just about to be joined by my dog. Oh, here she is. This is Willow. And they had like interesting case studies and stories in, and they didn't get that because they were deemed as major donors. So they were kept separate from that, which meant that they didn't get a newsletter, but then the team started producing this major donor newsletter. But it was really not very interesting. It was a bit dry, and then it became partly personalised, but not really personalised. And, you know, my advice was to scrap that and just personalise all their communication with their major donors. But also maybe some of their major donors really wanted their general magazine because it was really interesting. And you're missing out on other things that they might become engaged with, aren't you? You know, maybe they read that magazine and they decide to leave a legacy. I don't know. So I would say personalise it all. You know, also, if you know they're interested in something and you see something, send that to them. Oh, I saw this and I thought of you. I thought this would be interesting. The other thing you can do is kind of do a more of a broad comms plan of actually, you know, what are your group it into what are your one-to-one communications over the course of a year that you might have with a major donor? What are your one-to-many? So one-to-many might be if you're sending an appeal, you might not be one-to-many. If you are sending out a newsletter, if you're inviting them to an event, a big event. If you're going to invite them to a project visit, I'd put that in the one-to-one because actually that's personalised to them. But maybe you have like webinars about specific topic areas in your work, and you just invite a small handful of people. That would be one to few. So you've got one-to-one, one to few, one to many. At Money Tree, that's how we often advise people to kind of plot out all the different engagement activities and communications you might have with your donors, your major donors over the course of a year, and plot in what month they're going to go in so that you've got this kind of clear plan. But don't be so prescriptive that you just stick to that plan, because the most engagement you're going to get and the most benefit you're going to get is through that personalized communication with them. That is where you're really tapping into what it is that motivates them. What do they want to see? Also, and this is really important, ask them what they want. don't just assume that they want to get XYZ from you. Ask them what they want, and what's the best way of communicating with them. Quite often I talk to donors and they're like, yeah, I want to be kept up to date, but I don't want to be bombarded with emails. Or they might say things like, I'm going to carry on supporting you. I don't feel the need for you to keep sending me information because I know I'm going to support you. I love my yearly project visit, but I don't need all the information in between. So obviously, as a fundraiser, you want them to get everything, because we do, don't we? We want as many touch points as possible. But it's really important. Ask your donors, how can we best communicate with you? What do you enjoy? Are they somebody who likes getting lots of information and reports? Do they like things to be sent to them hard copy? Or are they someone who's much more interested and motivated by hearing personal stories and by having a one-to-one connection, face-to-face with people? We're all different, aren't we? And we all respond to different ways of communicating. So don't just go down one route. Ask them, think of as many different ways that you can, and creative ways that you can communicate with people as possible. I was once doing some interviews around stewardship for a client, and the major donors, it was for a university, and the major donors always got invited to a yearly coffee catch up with the chancellor of the university. And one of the donors was like, oh, I don't want to come to that. Like, she's really interesting. It's nothing against her, but that's not why I give. I give because, and it was a scholarship grant, a scholarship donation that they gave. And she was like, I just want to meet those people that I've supported. I want to hear their stories. I want to hear their journeys. I want to have that direct communication. Yeah, and that's so helpful, isn't it? Because that, the organisation can then stop wasting time inviting them to this kind of what they're thinking of as this really prestigious opportunity to meet with the top person at their university. But actually, they're not responding to that. And then the team are thinking, well, why aren't they responding? We're offering them this fantastic opportunity. What are we not doing right? Actually, it was just that they weren't interested. They really wanted to just meet the people that they were supporting. Hopefully that's helpful, giving you some ideas. But honestly, these things work best when you all chip in and you all put your advice and your top tips and your experiences in the chat, because I'm just one person. I definitely don't know everything. I definitely don't have all the answers. So use this to connect with each other and to help each other out. Steph, you've put a killer question in there, haven't you? Do you think AI has a role in major donor fundraising? I think AI probably has a role in every aspect of everything we do, pretty much, or it will do going forward. I'm going to maybe put that as maybe one of those training things. I think that's too big a topic for me to even begin to start talking about now. And also, I don't know that much about AI. It all feels really new to me. We've been talking about it a lot at the air ambulance and trustee meetings. Not only just like, how is it going to help? Where's it going to fit in with fundraising and efficiencies? And efficiencies is an awful word, but where can it make processes easier and less time, less of a burden of time for the staff? But also, how is AI going to affect medicine? How is it going to affect technology and helicopters and the tools that we use on the helicopter to save people's lives? It's vast, isn't it? It's such a huge area. And I'm not even going to attempt to talk about that in the next 5 minutes. But what's the role of AI in major donor fundraising? Really current, really good question. Thank you. Patrick's just completed some AI training with AI Confident, and it was really useful. Thanks for adding that in. Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, if anyone's done any AI training or top tips, do share, because I think some people are way ahead of the curve, aren't they? But for a lot of us, it's a new area. Oh, Jackie, in the olden days, I can remember being told off by a wealthy donor for sending a glossy impact report to them. Wow. You can't you're not going to get it right every time, are you? So sometimes we do things and we think, oh, that wasn't quite the thing for that person. But the great thing about that, when something happens and it's not that you've done the wrong thing, but it's the wrong thing for them, it didn't work for them, is that you can ask them what is going to work for you, doesn't it? Can't you? Like, what is going to work for you? What would you like to see from us? How would you like to hear about the impacts of your gift? I was going to launch into a really quite a funny story there about when I was at the theatre and we invited, I will say it quickly, we might go over just slightly. We invited her to this show at the theatre, and it was a Russian kind of avant-garde clown. It sounds very odd. It was called Slava Snow Show. It was very interactive, and at one stage, it sounds very mad, but this massive net, which was meant to be a spider's web, gets drawn over the audience above your heads, but it's quite low, and it goes above you. And when I went to see her afterwards, I said, "Oh, did you enjoy Slava Snow Show?" And she said to me, well, "Good God, no, I didn't. I hated it." She said, "I couldn't. That thing that came over our heads, I just kept thinking about, like, what if someone's wig got caught up on it and ended up on my head?" And she really detested it, really hated it. And she was like, "Don't ever invite me to something like that again." And it was brilliant because once I got over the like, oh, okay, I was able to say, well, so and so, you know, what would you like to see? What would you like me to invite you to? So it was a great opportunity to find out what she did want, as well as most definitely what she didn't want. Brilliant. Oh, good that you've been sharing. Oh, Tracy, you saw Slava Snow Show. It was odd, wasn't it? I liked it though. I really liked it. You've been sharing the AI tools that you've been using in the chat, so thank you for that. ChatGPT. Even I know about ChatGPT, Hemingway Editor, and a bit about the different training that someone went to. Grammarly. Yeah, there's so much, isn't there? It's just this whole new world that is going to be a really important part of all of our lives, isn't it? Right. There's 1 minute left, so I think I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope it's been helpful. Apologies again for me kind of getting in a bit of a muddle with the whole being on Teams and trying to look through chat at the same time. But thank you so much. I hope it's been helpful. The next one, before you go, let me tell you when the next one is. If you want to join me, it'll be me again. It's on Wednesday, the 7th of May. So yeah, please join me then. And I'd love to see you then. In the meantime, have a good month, and keep up the great work. Thank you.